More often than not, video games try to ease players in gently. A tutorial level or two, a chance to familiarise yourself with the controls, and minutes at a time of being told to use the right stick to move the camera like you've just come out of the womb or something, it's all par for the course. Not all games are like this though, and there's no hand-holding in the following 10 titles, that's for certain. In these games, the first level, or sometimes first section, considering levels are kind of a dated concept now, is probably even the best part. That's not to say that what came after was bad or anything, but a first impression is important, and all of these brilliant games put the best foot forward and completely suckered us in. I'm Josh from WhatCulture.com, and these are 10 video games that were never better than their first levels. Number 10, Resident Evil 4. Right, don't get me wrong here, Resident Evil 4 is an electrifying action-packed romp throughout. There's a reason why I always find myself buying it every single time it's re-released. This was the title that marked the series' paradigm shift from slow-burning survival horror to all-out balls-to-the-wall action. Our hero here, Leon S. Kennedy, collects ammo like there's no tomorrow and totes a range of weapons that past Resident Evil protagonists could only dream of. He also suplexes furious cultists so hard into the ground that their heads actually explode. The intro sets this stage brilliantly as well, as Leon arrives in a rural European village believed to be the last known whereabouts of the US president's kidnapped daughter. As we're introduced to the Ganados, Leon is besieged from all sides. Enemies climb a ladder to break in through the upstairs window and smash in through the front door. They attack with knives, scythes, their bare hands, and just when you think it's cooling down, a chainsaw. It's atmospheric, tense, and the level design is perfect, but it's the mystery and surprise that makes it so memorable. Number 9, Bayonetta. The stakes were quite high for 2009's Bayonetta. It was created by Platinum Games, a studio with a well-deserved reputation for developing the most wild, absurd, brilliant, and flashy action games around. This time around though, they were bringing something else along for the ride, a new main character who exuded all of those qualities and a whole lot of bold and beautiful personality to boot. If you're looking for a relaxing, peaceful title to unwind with, Bayonetta is not that game. You're thinking more along the lines of Animal Crossing or Stardew Valley, and Platinum Games just doesn't know the meaning of the phrase, rein it in. With all of this in mind then, it's no surprise that Bayonetta starts in explosive style. There's Angel spanking, a demonic man emerging from the dead and lighting a cigar with his flaming finger, a graveyard being destroyed, and copious amounts of profanity. And all of that's before we even take control of Bayonetta. And once we do, the stylish hack-and-slash action really ramps up. Number 8, Sonic the Hedgehog. While this little scamp's titles may have varied somewhat in quality over the recent years, there's no denying that Sonic the Hedgehog is one of the biggest icons in gaming history. His first adventure was released for the Sega Mega Drive/Genesis in 1991, and just like Bayonetta, it made its modus operandi completely clear from the start. And that's probably the only time anyone is ever going to compare Sonic to Bayonetta, so sorry for that. However, whereas Mario's equally legendary platforming adventures had a more sedate pace, Sonic was all about speed. It was going fast, it was about the spins, the loop-the-loops, the split second to react to an enemy before they spilled your rings all over the floor like a careless child with a box of Cheerios. This was what Sonic was all about, and it was a real thrill ride. Needless to say then, it's the much-beloved Green Hill Zone, the first stage set there more specifically, that has become etched into gamers' minds forever. That classic music has become the essence of Sonic and everything he stands for, and the level was perfectly designed to teach the player everything they needed to know. Not only that, but it did so in the best possible way. Green Hill Zone was a playground, essentially for us to experiment and get to grips with everything the Blue Blur was capable of back in the day. Number 7, Medal of Honor Rising Sun. I can't imagine there's going to be many people out there championing Medal of Honor Rising Sun, which more often than not plays second fiddle to Frontlines, but it did have one major saving grace, and it just so happened to be the opening mission. Doing what that other Medal of Honor game I just mentioned did for D-Day, Rising Sun opens on the Battle of Pearl Harbor, and at the time it was a stunning and intense achievement that hadn't really been captured in this way in a video game before. The D-Day push is probably a bit better, but this was still a worthy follow-up. Of course, today, that's all anyone really remembers the sequel for. Hell, I actually went back and played both this and Frontlines not too long ago, and I still couldn't tell you what happens after this opening. That said though, that 15-minute stretch at the beginning, chef's kiss level stuff. Number 6, Star Wars Rogue Squadron 2 Rogue Leader. The Star Wars franchise, like many major names of its kind, has had a bit of a checkered history with video game adaptations. Some have been great, some have been utterly average, some have been downright bad. Star Wars Rogue Squadron 2 Rogue Leader is one of the Star Wars titles though that has definitely achieved greatness. A launch title for the Nintendo GameCube of all things, Rogue Leader cast the player as series icons Luke Skywalker or Wedge Antilles, as they take on key missions from across the course of the original trilogy. As a flight sim, the game wanted to make the player feel as though they were right in the middle of the action, having a genuine impact on these familiar events and space battles. How best to do that then? Well, just thrust them right into the attack on the Death Star, one of the most iconic battles in Star Wars history. There is a tutorial mission that takes place on Tatooine, but straight after that, it's Death Star City, population U. Now that's how you start a game off with a bang. Number 5, Dead Space 2. The Dead Space series is another that simply does not do subtlety. The developers were known as Visceral Games, RIP in pieces, for a reason. They ensured that the players felt every necromorph attack, every limb they severed from these ghastly beasts, and every hunk of alien zombie flesh they stomped on, because you just have to be sure, goddammit. In the sequel, Isaac Clarke suffers from the profound effects the original game's nastiness had on him, awakening in a mental facility on the Sprawl, which is a space station off from Titan. If the first game had a dramatic and unforgettable beginning, Dead Space 2 only builds on that. From Isaac's attempted rescue to the necromorphs spreading chaos and destruction throughout the Sprawl, this sequel begins with an incredible series of set pieces, and Jesus Christ, what the hell has happened to this guy's face? It's grueling and horrific, but it's also the sort of action that would serve as a dramatic ending to a lot of games. It's a testament to everything Visceral Games achieved with this awful, awful futuristic world that these sequences are only the beginning of Isaac's next nightmare. Number 4, Metal Gear Solid 2 Sons of Liberty. Hideo Kojima has never been a man for convention. Of course, as we all know, one of the greatest and most controversial tricks Kojima ever pulled was that bait and switch with Raiden in Metal Gear Solid 2 Sons of Liberty. However, making the player play as Raiden after the opening mission isn't why the opening is better by default. This is actually my favourite entry in the series, and the story hits some huge highs later on. With that said though, the game mechanically speaking never gets better than this opening mission. The open tanker, the gorgeous implementation of weather effects, the verticality of the area, and the secrets to find, it's all incredible. This is everything a next-gen Metal Gear should have been, but the rest of the game becomes way less freeform and more linear from this point out. Number 3, Super Mario 64. As with many of the titles on this rundown, Super Mario 64 is a blast from start to finish. The game's reputation speaks for itself. It's one of the most highly regarded games on Mario's already celebrated CV. After all, the first jump to 3D was one heck of a difficult move for just about every series that tried it, and to get it so right on the first go is nothing short of remarkable. It's exactly this quality that makes Super Mario 64's opening the most awe-inspiring part of the game as well. There are several defining moments in a long-time gamer's life, moments that solidify their love for video games in general, and for a lot of players, that first venture onto the grounds surrounding Peach's castle is certainly one of them. Today, the game's visuals are, well, less than stunning to put it politely, but we can't hold the passage of time against the game in general. The freedom to play around with Mario's abilities while that great structure loomed in front of us was just amazing. Number 2, God of War 3. In a similar vein to Resident Evil 4 and Bayonetta, God of War 3 is another game that wore its love for wanton carnage on its sleeve. It was always going to throw us into the midst of combat right from the start, but this wasn't any old battle. Not many franchises would have the brass bits to choose the apocalyptic battle between the gods of Olympus and the Titans as a mere prologue level, but that's exactly what God of War did, and it summed up the entire series in a nutshell. As fans will know, the second game ended with the Titans ascending Mount Olympus with murderous intent, so it is only natural to start here after all. Still, this was one of the most epic skill set pieces the series had seen yet, and it was tough to see where the game could possibly go from there. Number 1, GoldenEye 007. It makes sense to finish off this rundown with yet another iconic title that hit the highest possible note right from the start. GoldenEye 007 is well known as one of the greatest games to ever hit the Nintendo 64, and one of the greatest games full stop in fact. An influential FPS that shaped the genre for the better. It was an incredible achievement for Rare, a fantastic licensed game in an age of awful ones like Superman 64. I mean, why was the son of Krypton flying through coloured rings instead of saving the world? We will never ever know. Anyway, not only was GoldenEye 007 a solid shooter in its own right, it was also faithful to the movie. Most licensed games get at least one of these two things completely wrong, so kudos to Rare again. The game's first level, the famous Dam, and I'm going to cheat and throw the second level in as well as part of that same section, started things off on a real high note, immersing both movie fans and gamers alike in the experience. So that's all this. Once you guys think down in the comments below, do you think there are any other titles out there that peaked with their first section, and do you agree with the ones I've got on here? Either way, while you're down there, could you give us a like, share, subscribe, and head over to whatculture.com for more lists and news like this every single day. Even if you don't though, I've been Josh, thank you for watching, and I'll see you soon.